My name's Natalie Handy. I am we're going to do a quick introduction, but we don't waste much time. So my name's Natalie Handy. I am the co-host of Confessions of a Reluctant Caregiver. My background real quick is 25 years working in the mental health field, primarily with foster care and families. But a handful of years ago, I became a caregiver for my husband and then realized I had been a caregiver all along for my mom. That's the story of so many caregivers, is that self-realization. And so I am super, super happy to have you guys with us. If you're joining us for the first time, or if you're coming back, welcome. So Guy, I will hand it over to you.
Thanks, Natalie. Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Guy Maytal. I'm a psychiatrist, and I'm the chief medical officer at Forge Health, which is an organization dedicated to providing effective, affordable, and accessible mental health care for all people, but especially for people dealing with cancer or their loved ones. All right. Well, should we just get on going? Because by the way, we want to welcome many of you back who were here last week live, and we want to welcome those of you who are here for the first time. Welcome. It's great, great, great to see you. And we're going to start right off. I'm going to share some slides with y'all, and we'll take it right from there. So let me do that.
Let's do it. And guys, as you have while Guy's doing that, as you have comments or you want to make comments, use the chat. So we are absolutely monitoring the chat as we go. And we have folks that are also looking who can be able to answer any questions that we don't get to as well. So that's why we want you guys to use the chat, practice using it.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, let's dive on in, as they say.
Let's do it.
Great. Well, let's remind you what we're up to here. So we really are in the middle of something. We started last week. It's really one journey that we're on together that we have in 4 sections, which is really all about the world of being a caregiver. What does it look like from the beginning through the middle to whatever the end of the journey looks like and beyond? And last week, we welcomed those of you we welcomed you to your new job called being a caregiver. And today, we are jumping right into navigating your new role. So even if you weren't here last week, we're just going to quickly review what we did, and then we're going to jump into today's conversation. Sound good, Nat?
Sounds perfect. I think we should do it.
Okay. All right. Well, let's recap from last week.
Let's recap.
Good. So last week, we started off by having a conversation about caregiving as a universal experience, that everyone's lives are touched by being a caregiver. Either you are one, you were one, you will be one, or you'll need one. So this is a conversation that literally touches everyone. I mean, we shared with you there are over 100 million caregivers in the United States alone, ranging from ages 5 to 85 and beyond. And the challenges of that experience. What does it take to be a caregiver? What does it take to be someone who's 16, 25? What does it take to be someone who is dealing with their own medical problems later in life, or in the so-called sandwich generation where you have children and elders to care for? And we talked about why take it on, whether it's something that was imposed on you, something that is a burden, something that is just what we do as part of my family or as part of my culture, the challenges of that. And either way, whether you were drafted, recruited, or volunteered, here you are as a caregiver. And what is it? Well, we invite you to consider that one way to look at being a caregiver is that it really is a job with many responsibilities, activities, most of which you are unprepared for and untrained for, let alone paid for. And that's where we left off last week.
And so today, we are really going to jump right into navigating your new role. Now that you're able to self-identify, you are saying, okay, I guess I am a caregiver. We want to talk about the impact that it has on you. We're going to get next week on your relationships, but we want to talk more about and really focus on you, What does that mean? How do you respond to this new experience? How do you manage the thoughts, feelings, and emotions that come along with it? Because it will vary, it will ebb and flow. And then the best part is self-care strategies. We always want to leave you with things that you're going to take away. And these are strategies that not only support you during your care experience, but well beyond. And so these are things that you can do in your everyday life that we would encourage you to do. And you'll know the ones, like we were listening to music. It's one of my favorite strategies to help really improve my mood.
Indeed. So, for those of you who were here last week, or even those of you who weren't, we sent out a survey with a couple of questions and really appreciate many of you took the time to fill it out.
Mm.
And the first question was, how did you get here? Were you drafted, meaning the experience was no choice? Were you recruited, meaning someone tapped you on your shoulder and asked you, or did you volunteer? Or something else, like a combination of all three? And those of you who answered, half of you had the experience of, I was drafted, no choice. 8% said recruited and 17% volunteered, but a full quarter were not one or the other, or some combination thereof.
And I think that's it's very common because honestly, as a spouse, I it wasn't that I was drafted and but I wasn't asked. And so I totally understand the other, which is typically a combination, and it typically leans into obligation of some sort. Rather, and the thing is it's a welcome. I welcomed the obligation to support my husband. I welcome that obligation to support the loved ones that we have. But there were some comments that you guys made. And so one of the other questions during the survey was we asked you about challenges and things that you might have been surprised about. What are the rewards, that you may have experienced? And thank you so much, because you guys really poured your heart into these comments and really gave us your authentic self. And this is the hardest part, especially as a caregiver, to be able to say out loud, unless you feel you're with a safe person, a non-judgmental space. And so some of the challenges, which I completely relate to, the biggest challenge for me has been the realization that it all falls on me. I am married, but I am single. And I can definitely relate to that, as I was shoveling snow down the driveway on a task that I wouldn't have done in the past. But I looked at the silver lining, burned some calories, got some brownies made. Love that part. And then the surprises and the rewards. The reward, really getting that occasional hug or the I love you, and the truly feeling the gratefulness that he has for me always being there. It's those moments that you can't let slip by you really quickly. And those are great. Those are the feelings that help keep you going. They are the bucket fillers, and I call them glimmers. Those are the glimmers that keep you going. A little bit different than silver lining, and we'll talk about that. But those are the sweet spots that offer those intimate moments that remind you of your original. So, Guy, what are you doing?
A good question. You know, it really is a question that we ask ourselves as a caregiver. What are we doing? What are we doing? What is the bigger picture context here? And, we'll start by sharing just a brief little anecdote about President John F. Kennedy in 1961. He was touring the headquarters of NASA, and he saw someone who was clearly a janitor holding a broom, but he asked him, what are you doing? What do you do here? And the janitor looked at him incredibly confused and says, what do you mean? I'm helping put a man on the moon.
Mm. And so this is Viktor Frankl is a favorite author. And this quote really does respond to me. It really speaks to me, actually. It's the why, really not the how. And so those who have a why to live can bear with almost any how. And I'm going to tell you, there are a number of times when when I have felt overwhelmed, that I'm like, how am I going to get this done? How am I going to get all of these tasks done? And I have to remember my why. And my why is not because I'm obligated, not just because it's typically like, it's because I'm caring for my loved one. That does actually make me happy when he's well. I'm caring, it makes me feel good. And so when you understand your why, it makes the how a lot more bearable or manageable. It doesn't necessarily mean it's easier. It just makes it more manageable, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really is a new context for living, being a caregiver. It's a new world that you've stepped into. And one of the ways that we invite you to frame it as is as the world of and. See, there's sometimes we walk around like this is the way it's supposed to be over here, like the good stuff. The bad stuff shouldn't be that way. It needs to be different than that way. But we're inviting you to consider that the context of caregiving includes all of it. It includes the bad, the good, the unexpected. It includes fulfillment and joy. It includes sadness and frustration and everything in between. It's the world of and.
You're going to hear lots of and throughout the
Lots
series.
and lots of and. And so the question we start with is, Nat,
When does the transition occur? And this is the hardest part. It's almost going back to saying, when you self-identify. So does the transition to caregiver occur when you go from supportive relationship to caregiver? So from spouse to caregiver? Do you self-identify at that point? Is it at diagnosis? I can tell you for me, I just thought I am Jason's wife. I am a fierce advocate. I never thought of myself as a caregiver until after. So that affects people differently. What about a change in responsibilities? I think in any of our roles and our personal roles, our relationship roles, we always have responsibilities. We know that can ebb and flow over time, but that is definitely, does it change with certain responsibilities? Does it change with certain actions or tasks? Or does it never change? Do you just say, I'm not going to be this. I am sticking with this. And it really feels like a burden. Like, I don't want to do this and I'm not willing to accept this, because a lack of acceptance into a new role is really going to limit you from really experiencing that joy and finding those silver linings and giving yourself a different opportunity to evolve personally.
yeah. And this conversation today really is, how do you navigate being a caregiver, living a caregiver? It's between you and you. And
Mhm.
so, of course, you're like, all right, guy, Nat, I'm a caregiver. Fine. Now what?
Now what?
Well, now what is all the things, like all the challenges that come with it. There's an emotional impact of being a caregiver. There's the sadness and the anger and the grief and the helplessness and the frustration. There are the physical symptoms that go along with having two full-time jobs sometimes, one of which being a caregiver.
Mhm.
The fatigue and the sleep interruptions and you getting sick frequently, given how run down sometimes you become. And then all the cognitive and other mental issues that go along with it, the feeling of overwhelm, the forgetfulness, the cognitive changes, and then the guilt and the resentment that go along with being a caregiver, the self neglect, the isolation, and the withdrawal.
Mm.
Well, given all that,
It makes perfect sense that you would probably just want to run away. And I don't know how many of you guys have felt this. I see some of the comments in here, lots of sleep deprivation. I had a breakdown. Thank you, Kelly, for sharing that, because the reality is every now and then I would have random acts of crying and I wasn't sure how to figure it out. And all I wanted to do was to go back to what was familiar and what was safe. And you have to ask this question:
and
Guy,
never go back to how it was. And
can
we
I?
really do wish that we could, but you can't.
Mm-mm.
Time moves in only one direction. And if you could, would you really want to? There's the other side of being a caregiver that we'll touch on momentarily. But what happens is when the mind is confronted with something that's real, what's actually happening in your life, it compares reality to a memory.
Mm.
It compares a reality to some other way than how it is right now. And then for many of us, we long for the memory instead of dealing with what's in front of us. And for a lot of us, there's a word for that. That word is grief.
Mm.
Like grieving the life that we had is what emerges out of comparing reality to some other way than how it should be that it was. And it's challenging. It's common.
And grief, I also would say, in my opinion, changes and evolves as well. No different than your thoughts and feelings and emotions, but it really is the grief that I had at the beginning of Jason's cancer journey or my mom's Parkinson's is different than the grief I experience now and the grief of the after. And it will continue to evolve and last with us because we do experience grief for all kinds of different ways. But a lot of things I think that we hear time after time, guys, that a lot of caregivers it just long for yesterday.
Yeah. Well, and maybe there'll be some bright light or some positive that comes out of this.
Right.
Yeah.
So being of service is not in order to. I like this. There's no guarantee of a stronger relationship with your care recipient. So you can't expect that, oh, I'm going to be closer to my spouse. I'm going to be closer to my loved one. Whatever the relationship is, there's no guarantee of that. There's no guarantee that other people will just stand up and just clap for you like you are the best, you are sacrificing, you are doing an amazing job. Half the time I felt like people saw me and were really uncomfortable. I don't know how many of you caregivers have experienced where people see you and then they just kind of stumble over their words because they don't know what to say or the conversations are abruptly short, but there's not a lot of admiration. And then also, there's no guarantee of getting a break from the other responsibilities. There was no one to take all the extra things that I had taken on, to take some of the burden off of me. So caregiving does always come with an and.
Yeah. Part of the and is, oh, it shouldn't be this way. And another part of the and is I'm doing it wrong.
Mm.
Or somebody else would do it better. Or out there, someone has knowledge. Or I should be feeling different. The world of and is there's no right way to be a caregiver. There's no correct experience.
Mm.
It is the way it is. And by the way, the world of and includes the positive. It really
Absolutely.
does. It really, really does. And it includes, dare we say, opportunities for growth, for developing resilience, like the ability to bounce back from adversity. And that is a practice. It is a challenge, but it is a practice. A practice is, in one way to think about practice, is the thing that you do a lot that you fail at.
Mm.
Finding the silver lining in things is a practice. It's not something that you're born with. It's not something that you can lose. It's something that you practice. And the search itself has the opportunity for reward or joy or fulfillment or intimacy. If you're not practicing that, then what you're likely going to be left with is the frustration and the distress or even misery without the other side.
And so I'll say this, we talk about this being a new context for living. So the caregiver role, and I'm going to say this over and over and over again, it is concurrent at this point. And we are used to concurrent roles, or as I would say, multiple responsibilities in the workplace. We have our job description, there's lots of things. Some tasks don't feel very complementary to one another, but there are things that we're asked to do, and we just do it. And we call that, really multitasking. But in our personal lives, we look at it and I think of myself, I want to be the daughter. I want to be this. The reality is I am a daughter and a caregiver. I am a spouse and a caregiver. And it's really how you choose to define it. There is no certain number of tasks or actions that you will complete that say, oh, now you're a caregiver. And so you have to rethink it at that point. You have the opportunity to define what you want this experience to be. Are you going to put a lens on that was positive? Even though it's hard, you don't have to just be Pollyanna about everything and be like, oh, everything's great. And then you're crying on the inside. It really is about allowing yourself to experience the emotions and seek out those silver linings and the glimmers of the day to allow you to personally grow. But
Yeah,
how many times have we said
absolutely.
it wasn't supposed to be this way? Oh, we
Yeah,
switched.
no, it wasn't. Sorry, I went a little
No,
too
it's
fast.
okay. We got excited.
Yeah, but the world, I got really excited. The world of it wasn't supposed to be this way shows up all the time.
Absolutely.
The world of, and there's nothing more human than it wasn't supposed to be this way. Like none of us plan for being a caregiver. None of us expect our loved ones to fall ill. None of us expect ourselves to fall ill if we need a caregiver. But it does happen. And then we live as if we have some foreknowledge of how life was supposed to go. And when you think about it, we don't, but we live like we do. And so the opportunity is you have an option. You can either embrace what's happening without denying any of the difficulties, challenges, or negativities, or you can resist what's happening, which makes it all the more challenging. Because you being of service in this way really, really is work, all capital letters. But one of the things we're reminding you is that you have the say of your experience of it. You are the author of this story. It's the difference between no one else is here to take care of my mom, so I guess I'll do it, to I get to take care of my mom. One isn't better than the other. They do open the door to different worlds. One of the worlds that it opens up to is, realize, oh my goodness, if I can resent the world around me or be of service, and being of service is really, I'm not the center of things. The sun doesn't revolve around me. In fact, I'm serving something bigger than myself. It has an ennobling quality to it. And yeah, I know I can hear some of you already, and I can thinking
I
like,
can feel it.
you feel it. My goodness, but that's not fair. Well, you're right. It's not. Of course, it's not fair. You don't have to. And at the same time, if not me, then who? But what we're leaving you with, what we want you to consider and chew on, is that you get to say.
Yeah. It feels like there's no choice, but you do really have a say in how you're going to experience that. And I love this next this is really important. Being of service doesn't mean you're owed anything in return. You should not hold anything over someone's head for that. And, it's almost like negotiating. And here's the thing, nor should you expect anything. That's really important. Being of service doesn't mean you're owed anything, nor should you expect it. It is just simply the act of serving another person.
And it's not, by the way, it's not true or false. It's simply something to consider, that if you do come from here, you'll have access to a lot more peace and fulfillment than walking around like something is owed.
Yeah.
Something can be expected. Like I took care of you all those years. Now you owe me.
Yes. And I'm sure there's some folks who may have felt this way,
Of
where
course,
someone made you feel like you owed them something
of course.
because they did something for you, and it is an act of kindness in my heart.
Yeah. That's why this is a practice. This isn't a destination.
Mm. And
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 it's my favorite part. You don't get to neglect yourself. So you do not have to be a martyr. You do not have to throw yourselves to the wolves and be eaten up is what it feels like. So some days I know as a caregiver, you feel like you've been chewed up and spit out a little bit, but I can't neglect myself. And so what we want to do is to look at some strategies that help you not only survive, but thrive. And again, we're going to give you guys resources at the end of the series. It's going to be tons of stuff that you guys are going to really like. So as you see things or you have ideas, throw them in the chat. Okay. But we can seek support from peers and professionals. Okay. We practice mindfulness and relaxation techniques. Now, Guy, I don't know about you, but the first time I ever practiced mindfulness and relaxation techniques, it felt a little uncomfortable. It felt a little weird.
yeah,
And it feels like because I'm so with myself, like
yes,
with no noise, it
yes,
can be deafening.
yes. Or there's a lot of noise, and you think I'm supposed to be like one of those statues of the Buddha.
That's exactly right.
The thing about any of these strategies or approaches is we're going to say this again and again and again. It's a practice. And so it's kind of like if you're learning how to walk as a toddler, mostly what you're going to do is fall.
Yeah.
So as adults, we have some expectation that we should master something the first time out. And if not, we're never going to do it again.
Mm.
But so whatever you take on, grant yourself the grace to simply try it out and try it out and try it out and try it out. And slowly, slowly, things will get more comfortable. Things will get more familiar.
Well, and I do want to ask one question. I know we're getting close to our time, so I always want to be respectful of that because we've only got one or two more slides left. But Guy, I think this is a really good question that a lot of folks will want to know.
Yeah.
When do you seek out professional support, i.e., from a licensed eligible clinician? How do you know when to do that?
That's really great. A place, I could talk a lot about this. I'll give you a couple of places to think from. The most simple way to do it is you should do what works. And you should look at how's my life going? How am I functioning? Underline the word functioning in the areas of my life that matter to me. Am I being fulfilled? Am I having the experience of being connected? Am I feeling completely overwhelmed? Or am I feeling like, you know what, it's tough, but I've got this? If it's not that, if it's not like I've got this, there's no need to suffer. One of the things we say around these parts is pain is inevitable as a human being. Suffering is optional.
Mm.
And if peer supports are not sufficient, and they are extraordinarily helpful for many, many people, and if they're not sufficient, then seek out the support of professionals. Just like a plug for something that we'll tell you more about at the end, at Forge Health, we are starting a therapy group for caregivers in March after this series ends. So stay tuned for that.
I do love a good group. I'm not going to lie to you. So this is one of my favorite slides, and I'm so excited. Guys, get ready for your chat because this is like a 30-second round right here. You are feeling frazzled, and you find yourself with 10 minutes alone. What do you do? Go ahead and start putting it in the chat. If you have 10 minutes to yourself, what do you do? Thank you, Nancy, for dancing. I'm going to tell you right now, you had me at dance. Sleep. There's a power in a power nap. Guy, I'm not gonna lie to you.
Mm-mm.
Oh, I'm not surprised JJ does puzzles. She loves puzzles. Call a friend. I respect that. Deep breathing. Be present. So we're going to tell you, we've got a handful of these take 10 strategies. These are things that we're going to give to you guys. Feel free to take a screenshot if you just want to have a little snappy snap right now from your cell phone if you want. We've got 100 more that I'm going to send out later, but these are great strategies that you can do right in place. And one of my favorites that's not on here that we've heard from a lot of caregivers is go outside. Simply take your shoes off and walk in the grass. Just remind yourself, and it's almost really beautiful grounding, and you're able to just let the sun shine down on you. So, Guy, I know that it's time for our session to recap. Look, we're at the end. I don't know where 30 minutes goes. We're sorry, guys. We should have done 45 minutes. We're sorry. But here's our quick recap. We talked about your new role, because I'm going to let Guy tell you about next week, and that's going to be big. We talked about the impact on you and how are you going to internalize this experience and how are you going to interface with your world? And we'll talk about that, spoiler alert, next week. But how are you taking care of yourself and what's the perspective that you're going to take? And of course, self-care strategies are so, so important.
So next week is you and the world as a caregiver. People, places, and purpose. How to navigate your relationships with everything out there. And between now and then, we invite you to consider a question or two, and we'll send it out in a survey with the email that you'll get tomorrow. And the question is pretty straightforward. Which areas of life has caregiving impacted the most? And we'll invite you to rank them in whatever order makes sense to you, and then to reflect on how caregiving has impacted your top selections. So please look for an email from us from tomorrow. Tomorrow, it'll have a video, access to a video of this session, the Zoom link for next week's session, and
our survey questions. Yeah, our survey questions.
A survey question.
Hey, we do have an exciting announcement. We were able, and I think our friends at Forge Health, to get CEUs for sessions 3 and 4. So just for sessions 3 and 4, which will give you an hour of CEUs, but there is a hitch. What is the hitch, Guy?
You have to be here live, and then you have to fill out the survey afterwards.
But you can get your credits.
Great.
So.
Well, thank you again to all of you who are here, who stayed on. It is our honor and privilege to be able to share this conversation with you. And we'll stay on for a few minutes for those who want to stay on and chat or ask questions. And otherwise, we'll see you next week.
Thanks, guys.